I'm Councillor Keith Wellham and I'm chairing the meeting today. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Can I move to the agenda, please? I would like to take item 13 directly after item 9. Both are reports on housing matters, so I think that makes sense. Can I also move item 7, that's the key decisions list, so that we look at the key decisions list and items 10 and 11, the work plans, together? I think that's logical rather than taking them separately. So if you are all happy with that, can I ask if there are any apologies for absence and substitutions, please?
Chair, this is Councillor Ekpenyong. I'm substituting for Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. Can I now ask the Governance Officer to take a roll call of the members present?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Can I just introduce the officers first who are here, please? We have Christine Thurlow, Professional Lead for Key Sites and Infrastructure. We have Robert Hobbs, Corporate Manager Strategic Planning, Anit Bennick, Strategic Planning, Policy and Infrastructure Officer, and Louise Barker for Housing Enabling Officer, and that's all for item 8. And for item 9 and 13, we have Gavin Fisk, Assistant Director for Housing, Heather Tucker, Corporate Manager for Housing Solutions, and Louise Barker, Housing Enabling Officer. And I think we might also have Justin King, who is from Parkside Housing. So members, I'll now take your attendance, please. Councillor Sean Dawson. Okay. Councillor Jane Gould.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Catherine Grandin.
Good morning.
Councillor Alistair McCraw.
Good morning.
Councillor Adrian Osborne.
Good morning, present.
And for Babergh Council, we have received apologies from Councillor Mary McLaren. We now move to Mid Suffolk District Council. Councillor Terence Carter.
Good morning.
Councillor James Caston. And we come to Councillor Paul Ekpenyong, who is substituting for Councillor Vinya Haddingham.
Good morning.
Councillor Dave Muller.
Good morning.
Councillor Keith Scarf.
Morning.
And Councillor Wellham.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Can we receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? Are there any to declare, please?
Yeah, yes, I have a local non-pecuniary interest regarding the disabled housing.
That's item 13, the disabled facilities grants. Yeah, thank you.
That's correct.
Item 3, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 4th of September. These minutes are deferred to the next meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can we receive notification of any petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme, please?
None received.
Thank you. Questions by the public?
None received.
Item 6, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 7 we are deferring until we get to item 10 and 11. So we're now moving on to item 8, scrutiny and first review of the Babergh and Mid Suffolk Housing Delivery Test Action Plans. And I'd like to invite Christine Thurlow, Professional Lead for Key Sites and Infrastructure, to introduce the report, please.
Good morning, everybody. The Housing Delivery Test Action Plan requirement was because government introduced a measure in February 2019 called the Housing Delivery Test. The Housing Delivery Test produced a figure that each council should hit in terms of housing delivery. So in February 2019, for Babergh, it was 420, and for Mid Suffolk, it was 556. And in the first housing delivery test, Babergh achieved 88% of that figure, and Mid Suffolk achieved 81% of that figure. This meant that both councils had to produce a housing delivery test action plan by August 2019. So after quite a bit of work, both councils did indeed produce a housing delivery test action plan, and it was adopted by both councils in June and placed on the website in order that that deadline was met. And it was our intention at the time, and members signalled this, that we should produce one each year, whether it be for legislative purposes or not, on the grounds to do so would be good practice and be due diligence. So the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan is required to be evidential, and it must be the subject of stakeholder consultation. And so our evidence for both action plans is set out in your document in the report at 4.3. I won't go all through that. No doubt you're familiar with it. Following adoption of the joint housing, of the joint homes and housing strategy, and then the production of the HDTAP, there were work streams leads set up for each of the 23 work streams that we identified as being the ones that we should focus on. And you have got 3 of the people that have been actively engaged on that project here today to ask questions as you wish. So recent work that we've been involved in started with looking at the housing delivery test figures for February 2020. This was pre-COVID, and we established that Babergh had achieved 123% of its target, with a new figure of 416 houses to find each year, and Mid Suffolk had achieved 99% of its target, with a new figure of 535. So we didn't need a housing delivery test action plan for legislative purposes this year. And we were, you might recall, bringing this item to scrutiny on the 25th of March, but that process was interrupted by COVID. However, we have tried to prepare in your appendices the pre-COVID and the current position in July in appendices F and G, in terms of looking at the pipeline of housing delivery going through. And I would refer you to paragraphs 4.21 and 4.23, which give you some key facts about housing delivery in 2018-19, and then housing delivery in 2019 and 20. So the recommendation is that the content of this report and the appendices before you help to inform the scrutiny process, and obviously make any recommendations as you deem appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I'm sure that there will be some questions from members. I'm going to go through the list of members, not necessarily in alphabetical order. And if you would, if you have a question, would you please ask at the appropriate point? And this is for questions, it's not for debate. So could I ask Paul Eckmingong, please, to ask any questions he may have?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding paragraph 4.21, which Christine Thurlow just referred to. I'd like to understand the relationship between the total number of outstanding permissions and the calculated 5-year housing supply. I don't quite see the relationship of these two figures, and I guess there ought to be one. That's my question for the moment.
Can I refer that question to Rob Hobbs, please?
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So effectively, the 5-year housing land supply looks at what's known as deliverable sites, whereas the total outstanding planning permissions are deliverable and developable sites, i.e. they could come forward in years 6 to 10 or beyond that across the plan period. The definition of deliverable is really offering a suitable location for development now, and it's achievable with a really realistic prospect that housing will be delivered on the site within 5 years. I hope that provides the clarity.
Thank you. Councillor, is that okay as an answer?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I move on to Councillor Dave Muller, please?
No questions at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Terence Carter.
Yes, thank you. I have 2 questions to ask. First, regards to section 5. This is just, I know it's just be following themes, but I am assuming that the themes are not in order of priority, these being housing, economy being second, environment and strong, healthy communities. And the second question would be on section 11, environmental implications. I do wonder, when taking on an individual case, I assume the environmental implication is accounted for, but when we are talking a large number of developments, at what point does it become a requirement to have a environmental impact assessment? As when you are taking a large development, when your turnover of earth, which absorbs a great deal of carbon, when you're taking account for the equipment used to make it, the vehicles and that lot, I'd assume there's going to be a greater environmental impact than just say a building being done in the back garden.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Tom Barker, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yes, if that's okay. So just to clarify, in section 5, the themes are absolutely not in priority order. All of those themes are priorities for the council. In terms of section 11 and the environmental implications, that refers to the environmental implications of this report rather than the environmental implications of the delivery of housing, for example, which is assessed during planning applications and allocations and plan making and all those other things. So just to confirm, section 5, the themes are not in any priority order. They are all our priorities. And section 11, that refers solely to the implications of this report rather than housing delivery per se across a broader issue.
Thank you very much. Have you any other questions, Councillor Carter?
No other questions at this moment.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Osborne, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yet I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Has Councillor James Caston arrived? I don't think so. Or Councillor Sian Dawson? No, we'll move on to Councillor Jane Gould then, please.
Thank you, Chair. No questions at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Grandon.
No questions at this time, thank you.
Councillor Alistair McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I have a sort of question, I think, for Rob Hobbs, and perhaps Tom Barker, and it concerns the preparation of the evidence base that we've produced to give ourselves these figures, and it seems to be quite robust. Can I ask if the preparation of these figures has been figured in. This is not strictly related to this report, but the subject continues in another format. Has this evidence been of use in preparing our response to the government white paper consultations on planning for the future, since that's currently on the table? Hello?
Yes, I'll come back to that, Councillor McCraw. Yeah, I mean, the evidence base is like you say, is what we use in making any responses to consultation or in producing other documents. I mean, in essence, we've got a report going to council this week on planning changes to current planning system, where the housing local housing need figure is the standard method is being proposed to be changed. So we've produced a response to that, but that's looking at the need figure rather than the supply at the moment.
My concern was fundamentally whether the evidence gathered here was applicable to the new method of calculation, or if we were literally having to tear all the work that has been, and it's a massive amount of work and it's much appreciated. We've had the extra 6 months or so of figures. Has that sort of literally been, is that going to be thrown on the scrap heap, or has it still got validity?
No, the evidence is still got validity. What the government's proposing to do is update the standard method through the planning practice guidance, and when that comes into effect, then that would be the new requirement. But all the evidence that goes into the supply will not be discarded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Page 55 and 56 refer to surveys that we done with key stakeholders. Large building companies, small house builders, etc. Obviously, due to COVID, we weren't able to have a really effective engagement exercise in March. The update shows that we're planning to have virtual meetings, or they're going to be considered and discussed with the leads, which I'm presuming are the officers. Do we have any idea when they will take place? Because obviously that's sort of 6 months plus ago, and obviously I think we need a better engagement process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Perhaps I can help with that, members. I have engaged with workstream leads, and we are intending to hold a stakeholder engagement in January 2021, which will happen before any new housing delivery test figures are issued.
Thank you. Anyone else got any more questions? I've got a couple of questions, but if any other members have got, members of the committee have got any further questions, please raise a hand. Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that such meetings are now being held virtually. If the COVID situation is the same as it is currently, should there also be an option to do meetings in a person-to-person way, face-to-face way, in a controlled environment, in large enough spaces and so on? Do you not think they might be more effective now that things are beginning to open up? Well, hopefully they are, depending on what happens in the next few weeks. Is that something that could be considered?
Tom Barker.
Yes, just for one moment, if I can go back to Councillor Scarf's query, and that just to say that there is engagement with the house building industry on an ongoing basis. So what the report refers to is a kind of formal event, but that engagement with the industry is ongoing on a permanent basis. And just coming to Councillor Grandon's question, I'm assuming that what you were describing was that engagement with the industry and whether that should be happening face to face or happening virtually. One of the things that we've experienced is that the industry really quite like the virtual meetings, cuts down on travel time, and it means that we can have conversations with regional representatives of major house builders, for example, without drawing them out from Cambridge or elsewhere where they might be located. So the virtual meetings that we have have tended to be quite effective, and where we're pulling together a number of stakeholders. I think Teams is becoming more normalised now, and you can meet with up to 45 or so. And I guess conscious that we're due an announcement in just over an hour's time from the two lead members of Public Health England. So I think the suggestion that we're out of the water yet in terms of social distancing requirements and such like might be a bit premature. So we'll see what those announcements are this morning. But we have, just to give confidence, officers have experienced really high degrees of effectiveness using virtual interaction with house builders, agents and other developers.
I know Persimmon, oh sorry, can you hear me? I know Persimmon, for example, have been in their offices for a while, and I had a meeting with them at their offices, and they were finding it more comfortable doing face-to-face.
I have had an email from Persimmon to meet with Ian Hamilton, and they have suggested that they would like to meet in their offices. I'll pick that up, I think, probably around lunchtime and see quite where we're at in terms of any further announcements.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got 3 short questions, but they are all linked. I guess ideally we would have completions at or just above the target figure year after year. What happens if we've got a sawtooth effect of completions well above target 1 year, below next year, and so on? And also, if we deliver above target for 2 or 3 years, might government use that as a way of raising the target? And the other question is, are there sufficient smaller homes and bungalows coming forward? And if not, what can we do about it? Who'd like to take that one?
Yeah, Councillor, I can take certainly the first 2 questions. So you're talking about the completions figure. Just also would like to caveat this year's completions. We didn't do our usual on-site checks that we normally do, which often strengthen the completions figure because of the COVID situation. But notwithstanding that, you could well see completions above target 1 year, below target next year, which is why the housing delivery test looks at a 3-year average. And in terms of your question around going forward, currently, as of the housing delivery test, the next one that is undertaken at the end of this year, the target will be 75% would be the threshold to pass the test. Right. So we're still doing well compared to that. In terms of your question about the target in general or the requirement, that's effectively, as we talked earlier about the standard method, that's based on affordability ratio. So what you should see is the more homes you build, the lower the requirement would be as a result of the affordability ratio improving.
Thank you.
In terms of bungalows, well, we do monitor completions of smaller homes and bungalows. I'm unable to give an exact figure at the moment, but they are delivered. I don't know if one of my colleagues wants to add anything further on that.
On these, the last part of that question was if we're not getting enough smaller homes and bungalows, is there some action that we can take? Presumably that's not within the actions of the housing delivery test action plan.
Certainly, when applications come forward for planning permission, we do look at housing need. We do address housing need through the level of affordable housing that are brought forward, and we do discuss other general need. But quite often the market brings forward what is saleable. So there is a balance to be struck in there. I don't know if Heather wants to add anything further to that, or Lou?
Yes, certainly, Christine, thank you. We do try and negotiate with developers with regards to bungalows, but they are something that are more difficult to bring forward due to the space they take up and the cost implications on the viability of the model. But it's certainly something we do work towards. As a wider piece of work, we have been looking at trying to develop through the Suffolk Housing Board, understanding exactly what the needs of both older persons and those who may have specialist accommodation requirements might be. We started that work off just as kind of COVID hit and we went into lockdown, and so that work did sort of pause for a short time, but we're hoping to pick that up again and develop a Suffolk-wide strategy so we understand exactly what that housing need will be in the longer term.
Thank you. Councillor Epping, you were next, I think, and then Tom Barker.
Thank you, Chair. It's a follow-up to the question you've just asked and the responses we've just had. The sort of philosophy seems to be that the requirement for older folks is to have bungalows, but having lived and travelled around the world, this is not the only way in which older people's accommodation can be catered for. And I just wonder if we look at multi-tenancy type blocks for accommodation in this regard.
Thank you. Tom Barker, do you want to respond to that and the previous questions? You had your hand up earlier.
Yes, I was just going to pick up. I mean, Heather and Christine have largely covered it in terms of bungalows and smaller homes. Of course, in terms of our own development team and our own development options, that is something that we will look at. And so, for example, as councils, the very first house that was completed as part of the council's house building in about 2017 was a wheelchair accessible bungalow on the basis that the market wasn't delivering that type of housing. And so the option does exist for the council itself to seek to deliver some of those types of development that the market isn't effectively delivering. And picking up the final point, absolutely yes. It would be remiss of us to assume that every older person wants to live in a bungalow, or that a bungalow is necessarily appropriate for all older people. And so multi-block tenancies, flats, other things, other products, I suppose, that are appropriate for older people will absolutely be part of our thinking.
Thank you. Councillor Epping, your hand is still up. Do you have another question? Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any more questions of the officers, please? In that case, are there any other councillors present who have any questions of the officers, please? If so, please raise a hand in the usual way. No. So thank you. I'll now open the item for debate and ask you in turn for your comments. So I shall go around in some order. Councillor Adrian Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've very little to say on it. I am obviously, with the changes that the government are bringing in, obviously that will affect at some point our delivery of housing, and obviously the representation from Babergh, I think, will be very pointed towards a decision one way or other on behalf of the whole of the district. Other than that, I can see the points. The only thing was that was one question brought up, which was to do with the amount of housing. If you don't get to that amount of housing, would it still go on to the next year because you haven't delivered that sufficient amount of housing? But I think that was answered well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's more by way of comment, really, which is that it's not just people of a certain age who may choose to live in bungalows, that people of all ages with other disabilities may be choosing to live in bungalows as well. So just by way of throwing that comment in, really. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with that. There are some young families who prefer bungalows because they just don't have the stairs, but they may have ready access onto a garden and so on. But it does seem to be that the cost and the land take for each bungalow is a problem. That makes that makes them less attractive to families, I guess. Councillor Catherine Grandin.
Thank you. Actually, it is a question. Would that be okay?
Of course.
Going back to what Adrian Osborne alluded to, how does this impact the new announcements made by the government recently regarding planning?
Robert Hobbs, would you like to take that one, or Tom Barker? Robert, thank you.
So the new announcements regarding planning are out for consultation at the moment. The first consultation changes of the current planning system ends at 1st of October, the planning white paper 29th of October. In respect of the 5-year housing land supply statements that were out for consultation, as I previously alluded to, the standard method would be updated through planning practice guidance, and that could come into effect once that planning practice guidance is updated. In terms of other measures, particularly through the planning white paper, they will require legislation, and there will be some way off. So there are transitional arrangements in place for example, for plan making that are picked up through that. If that answers the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Ekping-Yong.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I would say about the papers for this meeting is that certainly the reports seem to be extremely exhaustive. And I just wondered, actually, because I'm kind of new to this, whether we could actually have some sort of summary at the beginning, because there's a huge amount of detail to absorb, and I think the officers clearly are in a better position to summarize the work that they've done as an introduction to the reports. My second point is that it would appear that the issue of stalled site is one of the preeminent issues that we face with house building, but it's not entirely clear from reading the report exactly how we're going to try to overcome this, and I'd appreciate officers speaking to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, is that one for you to take, or Christine?
Shall I start, and maybe
Please.
Tom can pick up after? So we have been looking at stalled sites, and in Appendix F and G, you have got a summary of the flow of pipeline development going through our system. So you can see things starting off as outlined, and at the end of the day, towards the right-hand side of both the tables, you can see what is actually under construction. Looking back at stalled sites, as we did in a general sense, the Housing Infrastructure Fund work that we did in 2017, we did make 2 bids for money to come through to bring 2 sites forward, one of which was failing from a viability point of view. In fact, it was the only known viability problem in mid-Suffolk, which was the Fyson site, and we unfortunately, having made a Housing Infrastructure Fund bid for that, it was unsuccessful. Julie Abbey-Taylor was successful in attracting some housing expertise to look at it at a second stage, but as you'll all be aware, the site was subject to fire damage, and that fell away. In respect to Babergh, we did an awful lot of work and are continuing to work with the developers. We made a HIF bid for Ganges, which again failed for cost benefit reasons, and we followed that up with a housing infrastructure loan in order to try and get the site started, but again there were cost benefit reasons why that couldn't go ahead, but I do understand that Ganges is poised, ready to start now with all the conditioned discharge happening. We also did some work in respect of a site in the town centre in Stowmarket, which was Ashes Farm, when we did a development brief approach, and that has resulted ultimately in the site changing hand and an application coming forward. So we do look at stalled sites from a monitoring point of view, and where necessary, we will work with those that need help in order to bring sites forward. Tom, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that was fairly comprehensive, Christine. I think I suppose this is similar to the I think it was Tolstoy. Every unhappy family, all happy families are alike, and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. All stalled sites are stalled in their own individual ways. So developments move forward because the market supports it, the land availability is there, the developer's able to access finance, the conditions are written in a way that allow sites to come forward. There are no land constraints or contamination that unearths itself at a later stage. So there's any number of reasons why a site may not come forward at the pace with which we anticipate. And of course, COVID and all of the subsequent implications from that in terms of labour supply and materials supply and market conditions will all play into the issue of stalled sites. It is something that we've looked at and that officers continue to look at. Something that development management are constantly seeking to do is to ensure that they're not imposing conditions, for example, that make it difficult for developers to get on site. And there's any number of other conversations that I might have with developers to see if there's something that we can help them to unlock, that Christine and colleagues might look at in terms of infrastructure provision or borrowing. And Christine went into some depth on the Housing Infrastructure Fund bids that we sought to apply from. We also have an ongoing dialogue with Homes England, again, to see if there are particular sites where they might be able to inject some capital into the site to help bring it forward. There are inevitably those sites where perhaps landowners fall out or land changes hands, that then mean that different people have different ambitions about bringing sites forward, and sometimes they want to and sometimes they would rather sit on them, and there's very little opportunity for us if a developer doesn't want to bring a site forward. But if they do want to bring a site forward, then we'll explore everything that we can to help make that happen. And one of the things that as councils we've done that can sometimes get in the way, the finding a buyer for the affordable housing elements of sites can sometimes be difficult and can lead to a developer slowing down development or stopping completely. And one of the things that we as councils have done over the past few years is to buy Section 106 properties off plan, so to speak, which has helped some sites to move forward at greater pace.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keith Scarf, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to commend the officers for the very detailed report that we've got before us today. I think it has helped to focus officers' minds to how we deliver housing within both districts, and certainly a lot of progress has been made. So many thanks to the officers for that. Of course, one of the reasons sometimes why sites are not developed quite as rapidly as we would like is, of course, if a developer builds too many homes too quickly, they flood the market with homes of that type, and that lowers the price. So that's something you've always got to bear in mind, I think. You know, developers have a reason sometimes for not delivering quite at the speed that we would perhaps like, because it's in their interests perhaps not to, may I suggest. And that is something that whatever we do, whatever the government do through their white paper, I think will be very difficult to overcome. I mean, we have a large number of planning applications with approval in both Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, and that is good because obviously that's driven the numbers up in terms of delivery of the housing on a 3-year rolling basis. So I'd just like to make those as comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scarf. Councillor Alistair McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the delay there. I think the only question really before us is looking at the housing delivery test action plans, and starting from page 60, the Babergh one. Obviously, I focused on the Babergh one, but actually the two plans are virtually the same. The figures might vary. The approach taken, it seems fairly apparent to me that I say we've become more practiced at this, very practiced at this. When I say we, actually, I mean the officers have become very practiced at this, and it shows. There's a clear structure of what the background is, how the analysis goes on, the different classes and types of staller, how we monitor it, and the appendices contain some examples, some definite data. And so the only question really before this committee is if we can make any suggestions to any changes or recommendations to any changes to the test action plans. And I have to say, I can't see any. It's particularly relevant, of course, that the whole process may change, but that change is not set in stone. It's a white paper, and as Tom has suggested, this still requires primary legislation. It will take time. There are transitional arrangements, and I've looked at the draft responses to both the white paper, well, the white paper that we've prepared for now, and I can see that we are not alone in having some serious questions to ask about this, and I believe that's also being paralleled at Westminster and amongst the MPs of all groups. This could be seen as something of a knee-jerk reaction on ideological grounds. We're not discussing that now, but I'm satisfied that we've got a robust methodology, we've got robust figures, and given the circumstances, to have come this far throughout COVID and come up with a recommendation, I would happily support the recommendation that we note the plan as it stands. I can't really see that we can offer any recommendations to improve this. As I say, this is not the first time we've been to this particular rodeo, and I would like to commend the officers for their work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Terence Carter.
Yes, just to raise again on the point that's been made before regarding the bungalows. I can certainly tell you on the social housing aspect, bungalows for disabled adaptations are a very short supply. They tend to go as fast as they come on the market. So if we could be building more of those, it certainly would help out on various of our tenants. It did also have a sort of a query. I do realise this is regarding this report, that the again going back to the environmental impact assessment, as we do know the number of houses that we do require, as we do, we can, I assume, do a report on how it would affect the regards the turnover of lands, regards the amount of excess vehicles on the streets for doing the developments. Possibly we could do a report on the environmental impact when you're taking on a development as a scale of the number of houses per year that we need to develop. Granted, I assume this may be something that might be taken upon by the environmental forum, but it might be useful for when we are doing trying to tackle amount of excess carbon per year due to these developments.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, but I don't think that the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan is a vehicle for checking out the environmental implications of various separate developments or the development of land in totality. I think that is a matter for the planning applications at the appropriate time, and at a higher level, I think, for the joint local plan. I think I've answered the question rather than add it to the debate, but does anybody else, do any of the officers want to add to that? Councillor McCraw, you'd like to say something?
I'd just like to concur that that's not the purpose of the test action plan, because those are separate matters. This is a calculation and a supply. And yes, it's a laudable concern, but it's not appropriate to this report. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Muller, I think you're the last person on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with all the comments that have been made, and particularly what Councillor McCraw said. So I would actually be happy to propose that we move the recommendation as stated in the papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can we just look carefully at the wording of the recommendation before I asked for a seconder, because I just wondered whether it would be improved by saying the contents of this report and appendices, together with the verbal contributions to the overview and scrutiny, or at the overview and scrutiny committee, rather than just by witnesses, because I think that everything that everyone has said is worthy of consideration, and we didn't have a panel of witnesses giving us their views. So can I go back to you, Councillor Muller, and ask if you would be content to slightly alter the wording and in 3.1 and consider whether or not you want to include 3.2, because I think the general feeling is we don't have any separate recommendations, but what we would like is to support the plan and ask that as it moves forward, that the views that have been expressed here are taken into account. Can I ask Councillor Muller if he would be content with that?
Yes, I'm completely happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Muller. Councillor
I'm prepared to second that.
Right, we have a proposer, we have a seconder. I think what we now need to do is carry out a roll call. So can I ask the governance officer if she will take a roll call vote? Thank you.
Certainly, Chair. Please reply with for, against, abstain when you ask your name. Councillor Terence Carter.
For.
Councillor Grandon.
For.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor McCraw.
For.
Councillor Muller.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Scarf.
For.
Councillor Wellham.
For.
And Councillor Epkin-Young.
For.
That is a unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers for an excellent report and a lot of work that's been done on this topic throughout COVID and before and since. So thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to agenda item 9 on the agenda. This is the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Reduction Strategy 2019 to 2024. And I believe Councillor Jan Osborne would like to introduce this item, and then Heather Tucker, the Corporate Manager for Housing Solutions, will introduce the report. So can I invite Councillor Jan Osborne to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning. I am delighted to be able to introduce to you for consideration and scrutiny today paper JOS/1940, annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2019 to 2024. In March 2019, members of all political parties unanimously approved the adoption of the first Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and Joint Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Strategy. These strategies commit us to be open and transparent, providing information on how we are performing against the strategic aims set out within the two documents. So as part of adoption, a commitment was made to report back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee for an annual review and update to all members. This is the first annual review of the progress made against the strategies. It has been slightly delayed due to the impact of the pandemic, and in future years we propose the review is carried out in June or July of each year. Today I ask that members review and note the contents of this report and appendices along with verbal contributions. Heather Tucker, our Corporate Manager for Housing Solutions, who has responsibility for the implementation of both of these strategies, is with us today and will now provide you with a presentation which shows the progress to date, the actions currently underway and the future actions planned over the remaining 4 years of the strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. So bear with me one moment. I've got a presentation just to give you this morning. Right, can you all see the screen? Has that worked okay?
Yes, it has. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant, super. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present to you today an update on the implementation of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy. The housing strategy was adopted in March 2019 with 9 strategic aims and 112 associated actions. Much progress has been made in the first year, with many actions planned over the coming years to ensure the strategies are effectively delivered. Some of the highlights include an uplift in affordable housing delivery to exceed our annual targets, a continued reduction in void turnaround times, and successful bidding for homelessness funding. There has been some disruption to some aspects of delivery due to staff changes, and many of the actions have been reviewed to become smart. We have developed a new project management approach to ensuring progress is maintained. And as part of this presentation today, I would like to give you a high-level overview of what has been delivered against each of the aims to date, what work is currently underway, and what work is planned. I'm providing a high-level overview, conscious that it would be a very long process to discuss all 112 actions individually. I'd also like to take the opportunity to update you on the potential impact COVID has had on the delivery of these strategies. I will ensure that these slides are circulated with the minutes at the end of the meeting. Due to sharing my screen, I cannot necessarily see when someone has got their virtual hand raised, so if it's okay with you, I will take any questions at the end. So the first aim is that the housing market functions effectively, providing homes which are as affordable as possible to meet the needs of residents and support the local economy. In regard to what has been delivered, as councils, we went out to consultation on the first full draft of the Joint Local Plan during July to September last year. This included holding many events across the districts to try and encourage local residents to actively participate in the process. During the last financial year, 114 affordable homes were completed in Babergh, which is a significant increase on the previous year when over 52 were delivered. 128 homes last year were delivered in Mid-Suffolk, which is a slight increase on 118 in 18-19. Since 2017, 89 units have been added to Babergh's council housing stock and 65 to Mid-Suffolk's. This is a mixture of new builds, Section 106 purchases and street purchases. We've also established a new pre-action advice process to help developers bring forward better proposals. Some of the work in progress includes amendments and updates to the Joint Local Plan, continuing to secure more affordable housing via Section 106, and the redevelopment of the former HQ sites, which will provide 94 homes in Needham Market and 57 in Hadley. Some of the planned work includes adding a further 189 units to Babergh's housing stock and 233 to Mid-Suffolk's. Aim 2, there is a wide and varied choice of good quality, sustainable homes of different sizes, types and tenures to meet the needs of a wide range of different households. There has been some really positive work around this area, particularly in relation to our work with community land trusts. Lavenham Community Land Trust has already, working alongside Babergh, Hastow and Suffolk County Council, been able to deliver 18 properties with more plans. East Bergholt has also set up their CLT and is currently looking for its first potential dwellings. In Mid-Suffolk, we now have 3 community land trusts and a further 2 in progress of being set up. These are in Stradbroke, Elmswell, Laxfield and Mendlesham. We also now have a full-time officer in post who is dedicated to working with community housing development, which is fantastic for us. We have created an enhanced housing stock database, which we are continuing to update as we complete stock condition surveys of our stock. And we are also reviewing our garage sites and considering what opportunities there may be for some of them in the future, including redevelopment. Aim 3, there is a wide and varied choice of good quality, sustainable homes of different sizes, types and tenures to meet the needs of a wide range of different households. Oh, sorry, I've just read the same one again, so bear with me. Aim 3, homelessness is prevented and our services provide positive and planned interventions. There have been some significant achievements in homelessness since the implementation of the strategy. Sit alongside the homes and housing strategy is the homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy. This aim links those two strategies together. Some of the key achievements include the launch of Central Suffolk Lettings, which now means we are able to offer a guaranteed rent scheme to private landlords. We have also converted 3 properties in Babergh district to provide an additional 17 units of temporary accommodation. In January this year, we found out we had been successful in our bid to extend our supported lettings team, which provides support to former rough sleepers to prevent them from returning to the streets. We were also successful in a partnership bid with West Suffolk for a rough sleeper outreach service to be developed in our districts full time. More recently, only last week, we found out that we have successfully secured £100,000 to help ensure there is accommodation available over the winter months to prevent anyone sleeping rough, particularly during this pandemic. We are also working in partnership with other local councils and health to develop a new approach to ending rough sleeping for good. We've also submitted a further bid to the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, which we await the outcome of. But if successful, it means we'll be able to develop our own supported housing scheme, which will offer high support 24/7 to prevent rough sleepers from returning to the streets. Aim 4. Babergh and Mid Suffolk is an effective social landlord known for delivering quality services. I'm sure, having been very involved in this area previously, you'll be really pleased to hear that void turnaround times have continued to reduce further. In 2019-20, void days were 17 in Babergh and 19 in Mid Suffolk, both of which are within our 21-day target, which is a fantastic achievement. We also now have our own tenant board, which works alongside us to support the development of quality services. We have completed a star satisfaction survey of residents and are now in the process of implementing the recommendations. Aim 5. Homes in high quality, sustainable environments served by jobs and community facilities, appropriate green space, effective transport links and other necessary infrastructure. We have allocated over £1 million worth of SIL funding in Babergh and almost £4 million in Mid Suffolk, including £2.4 million towards the expansion of Startland High School. We are supporting the development of the Suffolk design process and will also be considering the potential for installing electric car charging points within our housing estates. The strategy is also being aligned alongside the environment strategy to ensure a joined-up approach to meeting the environmental challenges we are facing. Aim 6. The best use is made of private sector land and private accommodation across the districts. We have returned 4 properties back into use which had been empty for more than 2 years. We also issued 17 grants to landlords to improve the standard of rental properties. We are currently developing a new model for disabled facilities grants, which is due to commence in December this year. We have also conducted a review of the private sector housing service and have developed a plan for how we want to grow and develop the service over the next couple of years. Aim 7. People live in vibrant and well-connected communities, and homes and communities continue to meet the changing needs of residents. We now have officers working with integrated neighbourhood teams to ensure that health, housing and care services are coordinated. We are carrying out a review of our housing register work and how it works and operates. Although this has been delayed slightly to COVID-19, it is planned over the next 12 months. We are also planning to carry out a piece of work through the Suffolk Housing Board to gain a greater understanding county-wide of the housing needs of older and vulnerable people. Aim 8. Everyone has a suitable home and residents are able to live as healthily, safely and independently as possible within sustainable communities. We have installed over 500 heat pumps in council properties, 290 in Babergh and 254 in Mid Suffolk. We have also supported the establishment of Dementia Action Alliances in Hadley, Lavenham, Stowmarket and Eye, and are now supporting the launch of one in Sudbury. Aim 9. Both councils have strong relationships with residents, developers and other partners that enable us to deliver housing, infrastructure and services effectively and to innovate where appropriate. 5 neighbourhood plans have been developed in Babergh and 8 in Mid-Suffolk, and officers are currently working with 23 parishes in Babergh and 17 in Mid-Suffolk to either prepare or amend neighbourhood plans. We want to look to secure resources to deliver more improvements to the public realm areas of our council housing stock areas. And we had planned to carry out some developer engagement events, which unfortunately had to be cancelled due to the COVID-19 restrictions. However, we are now looking at how this may be able to be done virtually to prevent any further delays. There has been some impact of COVID on the strategies, but we're still very early on in the process of these strategies, having only adopted them 18 months ago, which gives us plenty of time to catch back up again and deliver all of our objectives. COVID has put a significant pressure on the delivery of homelessness, and we were given some extremely ambitious targets by the government of getting everyone in within 24-hour period, which has put an increased demand on the service. However, it has also given us a fantastic opportunity to work more collaboratively with other local partners, including the other districts and boroughs, the county council and health, including the clinical commissioning groups. And we are looking now at how we can end rough sleeping for good across Suffolk. As I've already mentioned, we've recently secured £100,000 to help us with accommodation costs over the winter months. Inevitably, as a result of the pandemic, there is some national uncertainty in the housing market. This has been well documented, and we're unsure of exactly what the long-term impact is at the moment. However, when restrictions were eased, builders did get back on site and many developments are now proceeding. We have had some challenges around how we can do home visits and deliver some of the repairs and improvements to people's homes during the pandemic. This was based on government guidance around whether or not we're allowed to enter properties only in kind of like emergency situations. Hopefully this is a short-term impact, and during the pandemic we actually did a great deal of proactive work looking at how we can utilise technology, and we've recently adopted a new system which means we can actually contact residents with their mobile phones and actually access their cameras, and they're able to show us their repairs in their home without us necessarily needing to go in. So when we do go, we make sure we're going with all the right equipment and parts to be able to do the job straight away. We also managed to clear a backlog of more than 6,000 outstanding repair job tickets. COVID has and will for some time being affect the way that we engage with our communities. However, we're holding virtual meetings with organisations such as community land trusts and developers, and there may be some challenges around how consultations for neighbourhood plans and referendums will be affected. But at the moment, we haven't actually progressed with those, and we wait to see, how things change over the coming months. We're very aware of obviously the climate change and the environment strategy that has been adopted by both councils, and we want to make sure we develop a strategic approach to mitigating and adapting to the climate change. There's a number of areas within this strategy that align with the environment strategy, and so officers are spending lots of time looking at how we can make sure they're joined up. For the council's own development and acquisitions, we're currently looking at how we set a rolling 3 to 5 year pipeline so that members can continually scrutinise that process. And we're also setting up a new design specification for our own new builds. So the next steps for the homes and housing strategy and the homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy. We have developed a programme board over the last year, which oversees the development of these strategies. It includes key officers and managers from various aspects of the housing and planning service. We review regularly the progress to date. We scrutinise internally ourselves what work has been done and what work needs to be done to make sure that we're on target to deliver what we expect. We're, as well as the housing and homes and housing strategy being referred to in the corporate plan, we're also making sure it is in all relevant service area plans in various aspects of the business, and also making sure it is set in people's objectives, making sure there is that golden thread throughout the whole organisation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the update, the progress on the strategies to date today. Unfortunately, as Councillor Osborne explained, this was slightly delayed due to the impact of the pandemic. I hope in future years to be able to bring this to you earlier in the summer, but hopefully this has been a helpful update. I'm now more than happy to take any questions. And I will stop sharing my screen as well.
Thank you very much, Heather. It was an excellent report, an excellent presentation, a lot of detail in there. So I'm sure we're all very grateful for that. I'm going to go around, not in alphabetical order, but everyone will get a turn. Well, I see hands are raised. I'll take those three first, but you don't need to raise a hand because I will come to everybody in due course. So I've got a list here. I'm going to use this list, but I will come to you all, I promise you. Right, Councillor Catherine Grandin, please.
Thank you. I thought that was a really excellent report, Heather and Jan. So, you know, well done on that and for all that you've achieved during this time. I was particularly pleased to see how the repairs have been tackled, and with hopefully just one visit now because of using technology and cameras and so on. It seems very sensible. But my question, I have a couple of questions. I had thought, or at least I seem to recall hearing or being told that we were very fortunate, certainly in Babergh anyway, I'm not sure about Mid Suffolk, that we didn't have any rough sleepers in our area. I seem to hear that, remember being told that at council meetings and thinking, oh, you know, that felt quite proud of that. Now, I do understand that some people may have been sleeping on sofas and that those people, that their situations may have changed. But it seems to me that all of a sudden, when the pandemic happened, we needed a lot of hotel space, and it seems that we need a lot of ongoing accommodation for rough sleepers. How can we go from having no requirement at one stage, not so long ago, to suddenly needing this much larger ongoing requirement? Please, could you answer that?
Certainly, Councillor Grandin. Yeah, I mean, historically, we did have very few rough sleepers within both council areas, in fact. And if we did find a rough sleeper, we were able to engage with them very promptly and find them accommodation and get them off the streets. Unfortunately, we started to see a rise in rough sleeping at the beginning of the year. And then when the pandemic actually kind of took effect and we had the lockdown situation, we found a significant number of people that were staying with friends or relatives and quite transient. And I think, as you mentioned, you know, sofa surfing, where they do go from place to place. Actually, that became untenable because people weren't supposed to be moving from place to place. They were meant to be having one home of their own. And actually, a number of people weren't willing for, you know, a friend to stay or a relative to stay if that wasn't their permanent home and they were sleeping on the sofa. So we did see a significant increase in single people needing accommodation. The other thing we found was that actually some people that are still going out to work, but actually living with maybe elderly relatives who were concerned about the impact of COVID and the risk of that person bringing the infection in, that actually it meant they were being asked to leave. So we did see a significant increase. And unfortunately, we have seen high numbers of rough sleepers in the last few months than we've seen ever within our districts. And we do still have a number of people out on the streets at the moment that we're trying to engage with and try and get them into accommodation. It is a challenge with rough sleeping. It's no quick solution, and that's why we've put this bid forward to the government for some additional funding to help us cover support costs, to put intensive support in place to try and prevent individuals from returning to the streets. Unfortunately, there's normally a whole multitude of reasons why somebody is actually rough sleeping. It's never just one cause or one issue. So actually trying to, you know, ensure we get the right support in place and have the ability to do that is certainly a challenge. So we have put this bid forward through the Next Steps accommodation programme, and we're hopeful we might know the outcome within the next couple of weeks.
You've actually answered my sort of supplementary question as well, because I know that, or I understand that people in that position quite often have other problems, perhaps drug problems or family issues. So when you say the support, is that the kind of support that you're referring to, that we bring in that kind of support to help them perhaps hopefully in the future no longer need our home support? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I mean, there's many aspects to support, and there's many different specialists that can provide support in a particular aspect. For example, drug and alcohol recovery outreach service doing a fantastic job in regards to drugs and alcohol. We have the Health Outreach Project, who we work with, who are funded by the clinical commissioning groups, who go out and look at the health of rough sleepers. Many rough sleepers won't actually be engaged with primary health services. They might not have a GP, they might not be able to access day-to-day healthcare services. So the Health Outreach Project go out and work with individuals and engage with them to make sure they're able to access things like the medications they need. There's then the kind of wider, more holistic kind of support element, which is around ensuring someone's tenancy ready. So you can't, just accommodating someone and putting them in accommodation if they haven't held an accommodation before and have lived a very transient lifestyle. It can be really hard for them to actually be able to maintain that tenancy. So we talk to them about things like how to set up utility bills, how to budget their money, how to apply for benefits, how to access reasonably priced furniture, all sorts of things. So there's many aspects to support, but we hope if we're successful with our bid that we'll be able to put intensive support in 24/7 with night staff as well. So that's often the time when people struggle most during the day, when many support services are open, there's less open at night. So by having a 24-hour support service, we hope that will limit the number of people returning to the streets.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Gavin Fisk, I think you would like to add to that, and then Councillor Jan Osborne.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. It's just on the point of homelessness and rough sleeping during the pandemic, and I just want to bring members' attention to the work that was done on behalf of all Suffolk authorities and their partner agencies, including police, probation, health, and so on. Just to inform members that during the pandemic we housed in the short term more than 200 individuals that were presenting as rough sleeping. Suffolk authorities took an approach which was collaborative and in partnership, and one thing that we did recognise was that actually what we needed to do was develop policies and strategies around actually ensuring that everyone that had come in as part of that Everyone In campaign actually found housing in the long term, and actually we eradicated rough sleeping. Work has been going on. We have developed a evidence base, we have developed a prospectus and a draft strategy, and myself and colleagues are working with Suffolk public sector leaders and Suffolk chief execs to finesse those documents and to try and drive those forward and bring those forward in Suffolk. And that will be based on some of the evidence that is already seen elsewhere in Suffolk around a housing first model. So I just want to provide some reassurance to members that actually there's a significant amount of work being done at a county level, but being heavily supported by officers from Babergh and Mid Suffolk.
Thank you, Gavin. Councillor Jan Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Heather and Gavin have already said most of what I was going to say. What I will add to that is obviously rough sleeping and homelessness has many, many challenges. One of those key challenges is helping those tenants to sustain a tenancy when they do get it eventually, so that we can ensure they stay within that home for the rest of their lives or however long they need that home for. And that challenge becomes really where we need that supported housing element, which we haven't got access to at the moment, or haven't got full access to at the moment. So I'm really, really hoping, and I'm confident in Heather and her team, that we will be successful in that further bid, where from the government we can go and get that funding to ensure that those tenants that we do place in a home have that support there that they require 24/7. Can I just add as well that the team under Gavin and Heather's direction have done a fantastic job, both during COVID, prior to COVID, and continuing beyond. So I would just like to take this opportunity to add my thank you to the team. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor McCraw, and then I'm going on to Councillor Muller.
I just wanted to add something to Catherine's point about rough sleepers. That in previous years, I recall that when we carried out our surveys, that we were unable to record those people who did not wish to be recorded. And obviously, with the COVID-19 situation, that situation no longer applied because it was an emergency situation. Everybody realised that. So we had in the past perhaps some false figures. We knew that there were rough sleepers within the districts, but of course the statistics did not show them for reasons of personal privacy or whatever. So they were perhaps a little bit misleading. We just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCraw. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank Heather for her excellent presentation, which is really interesting. And I'd also really like to follow on from Councillor Grandon's comments about rough sleepers. I've certainly noticed 4 rough sleepers in Stowmarket, and I'm sure my Stowmarket colleagues have noticed the same. I wonder whether Heather, outside of this meeting, perhaps via email, could perhaps give the Stowmarket District Councillors an update of what is happening with the rough sleepers in Stowmarket, please. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Muller, more than happy to contact you out of the meeting. If I can just also come back on Councillor McCraw's point as well, if that would be okay, please, Chair.
Certainly.
In regards to previous figures in previous years, there's a difference between those that are homeless and sofa surfing and those that are actually rough sleeping. So every year, all councils in the country have to do a snapshot on one particular night in time, normally around mid-November, where you have to look at how many rough sleepers you have at that night. It's quite specific wording, which I haven't got in front of me, but it's basically an individual which is believed to be and prepared to be bedding down that night in an outside space. We know, and all councils across the country have a huge number of sofa surfers who will go from place to place, but they're not classed as a rough sleeper because they're not actually bedding down outside. They're transient in their nature of having accommodation, but they're not actually bedding down outside. We have, been very fortunate in previous years. We've seen very, very, very few individuals rough sleep, which is one of the reasons why we've never really qualified for much government funding before. I think it's really interesting that when the pandemic first hit, the government looked at rough sleeper numbers across the country and allocated each council an amount of money to help them with accommodating known rough sleepers during the pandemic. For each council, we got £1,650, which is a very small amount and doesn't go very far to actually, covering many nights of accommodation. However, we put quite a strong bid together for the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government as part of the interim accommodation needs for the winter. And we really evidenced the challenges we'd faced and the number of sofa surfers that had kind of come forward and the demand we'd had for accommodation. We actually accommodated 38 people in Babergh, mid-Suffolk, that ordinarily we would not have owed a housing duty to. And I think it's testament that, by putting that evidence into that bid, that's why we've now been awarded that 100,000.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw, did you want to add to that? And then Gavin Fisk, and then we'll move on to Councillor Carter.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Wellham. I think it just demonstrates the difficulties of methodology and definitions of these things. That there are multiple definitions, but when you have a crisis like COVID-19, you actually have an opportunity to tackle a long-standing problem and give it some real teeth. And I have to say that what Heather and Gavin and the rest of the team have done on this subject has been remarkable, not least of which was bringing properties into use in a matter of a single weekend. That is just beyond normal praise. That is above and beyond the call of duty. And this is something that we'd like to see continue in the future, obviously.
Thank you. Gavin Fisk, you had another point to...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I don't want to labour the point around rough sleeping, conscious that this item's around the whole housing strategy, but I think it's just important to note as another example of the work that's been done as a result of COVID in a very, very quick time, and which supplements and supports the aims of the housing strategy that we have in front of you today. So, for example, just around rough sleeping, we now have in Suffolk, as a result of COVID, a rough sleeping tool which allows all of the partner agencies to capture those individuals that are known to be rough sleeping. Beyond that, it now starts to capture needs and current circumstances of those individuals. And the expectation is that this tool will now, in going forward, support the commissioning of new services. So where we're starting to develop and identify that individuals have a specific need, for example, around alcohol misuse or drug misuse, actually this will now start to develop solutions. And just to reassure members, all of this work has been developed as a result of COVID, and all of the information sharing protocols have been put in place with all of the partner agencies to allow this level of sharing, which actually was never seen before COVID.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carter, can I remind people this is still questions, it's not debate?
Yes, thank you. I'd be very interested to see the records as to how effective affordable housing is at preventing homelessness. As this is widely debated within circles of crisis and shelter, to actually how much it alleviates, how much of actually it's very widely debated. I would be interested to know also which other which outside bodies were involved in using this, because in a recent report by IHAG, I believe, the Irish Housing thing, just before COVID, they said when a great deal of issue regards rough sleeping was the lack of accommodation and halfway housing in the area, where they in Suffolk is a great deal of where they need help with drug abuse, not be able to find it in Suffolk, and therefore they not be able to keep a tenancy due to being too far out away from their homes and local support networks. So I did wonder if there's any work with them and other outside bodies such as Crisis and Shelter have gone into this report. That's just a question regards. It's a very great in detail report. It does it shows what can be done for COVID. It just doesn't really show the long term of this once things return to a new normal. So it makes me wonder how long this is going to affect for rough sleeping, and how whether a problem will resurface again when it becomes yet again an issue that can be so easily swept under the carpet.
Thank you for the question. Gavin, I think this is really a question about who's involved in the Suffolk-wide project.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to answer. In part, Heather may want to come in as well. I think Councillor Carter's question touched on the support for rough sleepers, and I think we've already discussed some of the work that's gone on. Certainly within the Babergh Mid Suffolk districts, we had identified that prior to COVID, certain parts of the outreach service was unavailable or inaccessible. Again, and I think we have to use COVID as the example, because clearly it's been the catalyst for adapting and involving more agencies and expanding the role and remit and resource. So I'd expect those conversations to be ongoing, and for the level of commissioning of services to be provided, so that actually there is no difference no matter where you are living in Suffolk. I think just to touch on accommodation, accommodation is obviously a finite supply. We can have the conversation whether it be around rough sleeping, or earlier in your debate this morning you were having the discussions around housing demand and the number of homes available. Certainly what Babergh Mid Suffolk have done over the past 2 years has doubled our temporary accommodation for those that are homeless. That has prevented any large numbers of individuals being placed in bed and breakfast away or out of the district, which I think is a real positive. And we've also been working with registered providers to seek their support, their endorsement and their commitment to accessing some of their own stock for the needs of those that are homeless. But Heather may want to expand on that.
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to note that it's not just the statutory services we engage with as part of this rough sleeping work. So there was, many individuals from districts, boroughs, health, public health in the meetings, but actually we've also held separate meetings with the voluntary sector as well, which included IHAG, Anglia Care Trust and organisations such as that. We're also doing a lot of work at the moment with the County Council around the housing related support contract. and looking at how that would be commissioned in the future. That's the contract that commissions supported housing for individuals. And we've learned a lot. We'd already done a review of that ahead of the pandemic, and we'd learned a lot around actually what we felt future needed to look like. But actually, as a result of the pandemic, we've learned even more. And so we're now honing that kind of process and looking at what the future commissioning model might look like. But we are aware of lots of the organisations, and we do work incredibly well with them. We've been able to, bring new services forward. But I think it's important to note that, a huge amount of work's been done in regards to homelessness since the pandemic started. But it's not just since the pandemic started. The team are constantly achieving huge amounts of positive interventions to prevent homelessness. We've brought lots of new things forward, such as the guaranteed rent scheme. Excuse me. Last year, we brought forward the Homeless Prevention Fund as an initiative to use money to pay for things to try and prevent someone from becoming homeless or from losing or enable them to gain accommodation. So a huge amount of success has been done in all areas of the housing strategy, really. Homelessness is just one element of it, but I don't want people to think it's purely as a result of the pandemic we've seen some success, because actually the team do achieve a huge amount of work and are incredibly dedicated to what they do.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a good reminder of the good work that had been being done in previous months and years. Thank you. Councillor Keith Scarf, please.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Gavin and Heather have just answered the question regarding supported housing and the moves on that, so I have no further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, could I just say that I have the highest praise for Heather and Gavin and the team. I think they've done excellently with everything, regardless homeless and etc. Just a couple of points I just wanted to make and have clarified. First of all, with homeless situations, have you found that it is difficult to interact with some of the rough sleepers in terms of them not coming to you, or you unable to actually speak to them in terms of what is required? And the other aspect is, have you found that we have had a lot of input from other areas, Essex IE and other areas around that that have come into here looking for actual accommodation and obviously housing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. In the first point, in regards to the engagement with rough sleepers, I think it's fair to say that some engage better than others, and actually a lot of these individuals may, will have reasons why they're on the streets. There may be, significant trauma they may have faced in the past, and they may be mistrusting of people in authority, and they may be unwilling to talk to us to start with. But it's not a case that we go out and try and talk to them once, and if they don't want to talk to us, we just ignore them. We will continually try and engage with them. We'll look at ways that we can try and get them to start trusting us, and it can be quite a long process to build up that conversation and get to a point where they start to want to really work with us. And that's a real benefit we've seen from the funding we got this year to have our own dedicated rough sleeper outreach worker who has the time to be able to keep going out and trying to engage with these individuals, building that rapport, building that trust, and trying to get a good resolution for them and get them off the streets. In regards to other areas, we're not seeing an increase in rough sleepers that are coming from other areas. They are generally from our own areas. We do at times sometimes see people come into the district that maybe previously were, just living over the border. We sometimes find that with Babergh, that we do border Ipswich, but actually, at the moment, we're not seeing a significant rise in that. It is generally people from within our districts that are actually out on the streets at the moment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jane Gould, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. I've got a question around the impact of COVID on evictions and for private tenancies and private landlords. And there's been something that national government has said, hasn't there, the 3-month embargo on this. And there's talk at national government level about extending that to 6 months. And there's the potential that when this is lifted and when private landlords can actually evict their tenants, there could be a whole influx of families coming into to your attention, really, to our attention. And it could well be also that will provide private rental houses that they have been evicted from for other people. So my question really is, and I think I probably know the answer from what I've heard, do we feel that our current strategies are going to be robust enough to cope with what could be quite a turbulent period if this does all happen? And is it advantageous perhaps to pick up some of the tab for these families who may have lost their jobs due to COVID, to keep them in the private rentals that they are? But I think I did pick up there's a fund for that, isn't there? And thank you, Heather. You've kept my attention from slide 1 to the end. And those who know me, as I'm further up the ADHD spectrum than some will know that is good going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. So in regard to the impact on evictions, unless anything's changed since Friday, which hopefully, well, it may well have done, but as far as I'm aware, the eviction ban actually ended yesterday. It was due to end on the 23rd of August, and at literally like the 11th hour, it got an extension. I'm not aware there's been any extension. So as from today, evictions can now take place again. However, it's extremely complicated. There's many different amendments that have been made to various different sort of legislations that we have to abide by, and people do have like longer notice periods and things now. But as a team, we've done a huge amount of work to prepare for this. So when the lockdown was first announced, we got all of our housing solutions officers to review every single case that they were working on. Everybody was contacted to understand for single people that might have been sofa surfing, whether or not they could remain. For those living in private rent who were under a notice, before the eviction ban came in, we were ringing those landlords. We were talking to them. We were actually agreeing with them to hold off any eviction until such time as the lockdown ended. At a later date, the eviction ban then came in, which kind of did that for us anyway, but we were already ahead of the game. We'd already done that. We've actually reviewed all of those cases, so we know exactly who we've got that's likely to become homeless at some point in the future, where they need to live, what family size they are. For some of those individuals where we knew the eviction was unpreventable, and we knew that actually it was just a case of waiting for that day to come, we actually have been able to house some of those people already ahead of that eviction actually taking place. We've really tried to be proactive in that approach. We have got a list of people that we still think homelessness is inevitable and we haven't got a date for yet, and we're still actively engaging with those individuals. When we first got the ban and we worked out how many kind of eviction cases we deal with year on year, we are expecting to see a massive influx and a real pressure, and we started looking at how we might prepare for that. But actually, because of the successful work the team have had to date, and because of the work we're still able to do around prevention, actually we don't think the numbers are going to be quite as sort of catastrophic for us as we initially kind of were predicting. However, there may well be lots of people that we're not aware of yet that aren't on our radar, but we have been having conversations with private landlords and actually asking them to tell people about us, tell them about the service we can provide. Because of data protection, they can't share those tenants' details with us who might be having affordability issues. But what we're saying to them is tell them we're here, tell them that we offer tenancy support, we can offer financial inclusion advice, we can help with accessing benefits. We can also look at alternative housing options that might be more affordable. Don't leave it until such time as they get a notice or they're at imminent risk of losing their home, because the earlier the team can work with somebody, the better, and the more likely we are to be successful in our outcome. We do have lots of other sort of tools available to us. We've got the guaranteed rent scheme, we've got the rent deposit scheme, and we have got the homeless prevention fund as well. We've also got a fantastic team of tenancy support officers who focus on financial inclusion and income maximisation. If people come forward to us with rent arrears, they will look at their income, they will look at whether there's any benefits they should be applying for they're not in receipt of. They will look to try and apply for any discretionary loans, discretionary grants, discretionary benefits they might be entitled to help make their accommodation more affordable. So the team are doing a huge amount of work in regards to that. Also, in regards to social housing in our own stock, we actually made a commitment very early on in the pandemic that we wouldn't take any action to evict anybody as a direct result of the pandemic. So we'd done that even before the government announcement. So as an organisation, we made that commitment as well.
Thank you
very much.
Can I just add a supplementary, which is that there is also an impact on private landlords, if they're just a small landlord with maybe just one other property to rent, and they lose the money from that, it has the impact that the landlord is financially impacted as well, and may have trouble himself paying his bills because he was dependent on that income stream from the one property that he rented.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're very acutely aware of that, and we do, you know, believe nationally there's likely to be a number of landlords that may well withdraw from the market as a result of you know, the eviction ban and the restrictions around what they can do, but we would encourage anyone that's having affordability issues to come forward, because we, you know, if we can get that rent back up and running and in payment again, you know, and obviously that'll make that easier for that landlord.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've just got Councillor Paul Epping-Young left, and then I will come to people as they raise their hands. But Councillor Epping-Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to echo the commendation of the work that's being done by Heather, Gavin and their team. It's extremely good work and very valuable work. And Councillor Muller already picked up my issue with homelessness in Stowmarket, so I look forward to receiving the email from Heather on that point. But I have one just minor point to note in Heather's presentation, which was very good indeed, but that with regard to the Needham Market HQ site, in fact, we're going to have 93 homes there, of which 10 will be affordable due to some redesign of the site that we undertook recently. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've now got Councillor Carter listed.
Thank you. Sorry, having a bit of trouble with my keyboard. I did wonder, would it be possible for, if you have records of problem areas of rough sleeping in councillors' wards, would it be possible to notify the councillors involved of said number of rough sleepers that you are engaging with? Just so we are aware in case there's anything that we can possibly do to outreach as well, so we can be even if we aren't able to house these people, if we were able to talk to somebody, at least would be a point of contact with the council that they may trust. I'm not sure freedom of information you're allowed to do that, but I did wonder if it might be of any benefit.
Yep, certainly. Yeah, certainly I'll look into that. The other thing is that if you do ever notice any rough sleepers, you know, it may be that we've not been notified of them, because we cover a huge geographical area. There is, you know, we do encourage anyone that notices a rough sleeper to refer them through StreetLink, which is a national website where you just put the report in, it comes straight through to the team, and we try and get somebody out within 24 hours to engage with them. So I'd urge any members, if you do see any rough sleepers anywhere and we haven't been in contact with you and just, you know, and made you aware, or you think we might not know that they're there, please do let us know so we can get the team out as soon as possible, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I've got Councillor Grandin. After Councillor Grandin's question, I'd like to move on to debate, if we can, because we're getting very close to debating rather than questions. So Councillor Grandin, and then we'll move on to debate.
Thank you. I've got a question about allocation. You mentioned in your presentation about reviewing allocation, how you're doing it, and the needs of older and vulnerable people. I've had, I think, as you're probably aware, at least 3 experiences regarding allocation policy. A couple of them are maybe due to the de-sheltering of our houses a while ago, that have resulted in the existing tenants. So someone has been allocated one of our properties, but the existing tenants who may have been in sheltered accommodation before, that's now been de-sheltered, not being able to live a quiet, normal life due to the person that's been allocated to that property, who doesn't fit in with the lifestyle of all the existing tenants. Now, it's all very well giving someone a home for life, but if this home that they're being given, or if this person doesn't fit in with all our other neighbouring tenants, or even people in the commercial, in the private sector, is this a good policy for everyone else? I'm a bit concerned about is this something that could be reviewed as well? Because I don't know if our allocation policy is working.
I think there's 2 points here. So in regards to the review of choice-based lettings, we've made a commitment, and we did start it just before the lockdown was announced, actually, and we had meetings with Councillor Jan Osborne and Councillor Julie Flatman, and in their roles as cabinet holders for housing. And the proposal initially was that we would hold some workshops with councillors during the summer period, where we try and understand what councillors' concerns were about the allocations policy and things they might want to see in it in the future, or in how the system is operated. Obviously, because of the restrictions affecting us at the moment, that wasn't possible. We did try and start the process by doing a councillor survey, which we had quite a good response rate to, and we've been reviewing the results of that with a view to hopefully holding some member workshops later this year, albeit probably virtually through Microsoft Teams. In regards to local lettings policy, so we do have a number of local lettings policies across the districts, and these sit underneath the allocations policy. They're not set out in the allocations policy. The policy refers to the fact we can hold our own local lettings policies, and we then create our own. So we do have one around the sheltered stock, and that individuals housed into properties there need to be of what we call a quiet and settled lifestyle, as far as we're aware. And obviously we don't know every person inside out. We don't know whether there may be issues. We do our best to assess as much as we possibly can, and generally speaking, we very, very rarely ever come across an issue, and if we do, then it's dealt with by the housing management team, and they look at actually whether or not that individual is actually doing something that actually breaches their tenancy. Sometimes, and I can think of a case recently where it was just a case of not necessarily understanding what their tenancy conditions were. The housing officer went out and visited them and spoke to them, and we've had no further complaints since. If it's an issue around actually they're not adhering to their tenancy conditions, and actually warnings can be put in place, and we can actually and deal with that through the tenancy management process. But it's very, very rare that occurrences like this come up. I mean, the other thing to bear in mind, that one of the challenges around a local lettings policy, for example, for de-sheltered, is you can set a policy up to say 5 years with a view that it's an older population living there previously in a sheltered scheme. The longer it goes on for, actually those people may have moved on, and the next people that have moved in, they may well be older, and you get to a position, if not, where actually you could have large amounts of stock across the districts that are actually being designated only for the older population, and you could run the risk that there's less accommodation available for the younger population. But we have actually, as part of our service plan we're devising at the moment for next year, one of the actions we've put in there is to actually review all of the local lettings policies across both of the districts, to actually look at what we've got, how long they've been in place, and which ones may need to be reviewed or updated.
Thank you very much. That was an interesting point, because I've heard of places where younger people have moved into former sheltered housing, and the young family that moves in is so grateful to have an older person living next door, and vice versa. So I think it depends on the tenant more rather than the age of the tenant. So it has worked very well in some places, I'm aware. Right, so we're on to debate, and can I first go to Councillor David Muller?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I've got nothing further to add, really. As I said, it's an excellent report. Big thank you to Heather and her team. Basically, that's it. I've got nothing else to say, actually, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alistair McCraw.
Oh, sorry about that, Chair. The finger.
You are muted at present, Councillor McCraw.
My finger passed and moved on, and then must have double clicked. I've been looking at the risk management on this report, and I think these are the key risks. The major changes in the state of the market, they're identified, the lack of resources to implement the strategy, lack of outside support, and unforeseen pressures. And we're going through one of the classic unforeseen circumstances that we could possibly manage. I think we've got to make a recommendation within this report and our response to it, that we recognise that how important housing is. It's one of our key functions, and a housing strategy might not be statutorily required, but it is an absolutely essential point that every council should be able to address. And I think we should be looking to reinforce the importance of this to the council, to other members, and to the cabinet. I'm sure they recognise it already, but I don't think it can hurt to restate this, that this is a primary function. I think that's something that could be included within the recommendations in some form or other. It's a really good, it's a high level strategy. It's not something to you can pick the bones out of individual parts of it, but it has really come together in the course of the last 2 or 3 years, well, 2 years particularly. Heather's been working really hard on this, I know, and we've seen different aspects of it. We've examined different aspects of it in the past, and I think we should be doing everything we can to continue that good work and provide the political support for the actual practical work. So I'd like to see that reflected in our recommendations. I will be supporting something along those lines.
Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Adrian Osborne, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. I got a bit mislaid there. Yeah, I'm happy with the way things are. Just a question that comes up, and that is that there are properties that are vacant, and obviously the criteria for the way that is then used goes into a lot of legal depth, I believe. So obviously we've got a situation here where a lot of residents are unaware of the way that the if you like, the empty properties that are around can't be dealt with as they wish. Could Heather just sort of respond on that?
Certainly, Councillor Osborne. In regards to empty homes, it's a very complex process, and it would be wonderful if we could wave a magic wand and bring them back into use quickly. The reality is that it is a long process, and if the owner is not willing to work with us, to go through the legal process can take a considerable time, easily upwards of a couple of years. But as I mentioned in my presentation, we have done a review of the private sector housing service, and since I took it over in September last year, and I've got a plan for what I would like the service to look like in the future. So we are hoping to be able to develop the service and actually deliver it in a slightly different way. And I'd like to see, us be able to do more work around the empty homes work and other areas as well, including energy efficiency and things in the private rented sector.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Terence Carter, please.
Thank you. I'd like to second what Councillor McCraw said before as well, regarding the importance of this report, and we do need to make it double underlined, so for the rest of the councillors. I did have a very strange query regarding not just empty homes, but there's been reports in the past regarding empty commercial properties where rough sleepers have taken over these properties and turned them into makeshift homeless shelters. There was one that was actually rewarded to be tenancy of a property, I believe, in a London borough a year before last, where the squatters actually have been given permission, and they were doing a study into how the effects of this, actually how it reduced numbers of rough sleepers. Has anything been looked into regards to using vacant commercial properties for makeshift shelters in this area?
Yeah, thank you. Gavin Fisk.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just on Councillor Carter's point, we don't have rough sleepers in commercial units. If we were to find rough sleepers in vacant commercial units, we'd obviously work with those and the necessary authorities to ensure that they were moved on. Obviously, there's risks of individuals living in units if people are not aware. I just really wanted to take the opportunity, and forgive me for digressing, but I just want to take the opportunity to talk to members about the fact that I think what you need to be mindful of this morning, and it's clear that the discussion has got a lot of breadth because housing is so broad that this is a housing strategy. It's a 5-year strategy. It's there to support and underpin the policies and the strategies that actually support your residents, your constituents in the borough, in the districts of Babergh and Mid Suffolk. In relation to all things housing. So I think what we've seen this morning is we've touched on some of the detail in terms of a rough sleeper sleeping on the street or an empty property that someone might walk past. I think the key for me as members is that you need the reassurance and peace of mind that the councils have the strategies in place to combat and tackle those specific issues, and hopefully that has been demonstrated by this conversation and debate, as well as the actions that are being delivered. But I guess you need the reassurance that going forward, based on some of those things, based on performance data, and based on the linkages to other district strategies such as the environment, the community strategies, that actually these strategies are working in tandem together to deliver results for our residents and not in isolation.
Thank you, Gavin. Yeah, you said something that I was similar to what I was going to say a bit later on when I had my two penneth. If we can, for the time being, continue around the list, if I can return to it. Councillor Jane Gould, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing else to add.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paul Eppingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Scarf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think work on both the strategies, progress has definitely been evidenced today. Obviously, we've concentrated, I think, largely on the homeless situation, but I didn't want us to overlook the fact that work on the overall housing strategy has progressed. I think one of the issues for us will be if we're unsuccessful in our bid for a supported housing scheme, how we progress that if we are unsuccessful, and let us hope that we will be successful, Heather and her team, because there's a clear, I think, need for supported housing within the area. So just wanted to make that as a comment, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Catherine Grandin.
I have nothing to add, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think everybody's had one go. I was just going to mention 2 or 3 other things which I picked up from this, and I don't know how the strategy can react to this, but it seems that 2 things seem to be happening as far as housing in some of the rural areas are concerned. One is that people are moving into our districts from more expensive areas, and by doing that, that may accelerate people working from home. Quite a number of people around where I live have previously lived and lived close to London and worked in London, and now they are quite content working from home. And I've spoken to them and I said, well, you know, now that the restrictions are being lifted a bit, are you going back? Oh, well, no, we'll never go back to the office. So I wonder if this sort of increase in people moving from expensive areas to cheaper areas is going to be good or bad for the local economy and good or bad for the communities. When we went to lockdown, we had a lot of offers of help from the community, but this may well drop away as people return to work in places like Essex and Cambridge from the Stowmarket area. So should we be looking to provide homes and jobs for people who work and live in Mid-Suffolk and in Babergh? Should we be providing homes that are of the home office type? Should we be looking at more of those? And I think, you know, we do need to make sure that the homes that we provide and the people who move, obviously people move into them, we need to make sure that they are contributing to a vibrant community. It's a responsibility that we need to share across both districts. And one other thing, there was mention of neighbourhood plans. On forget which aim it was, but one of the aims was to do with, and Vision 5 also I think is to do with neighbourhood plans and local planning. It seems that the NPPF and more recently the white paper is going to make it more difficult to get people to produce neighbourhood plans. I know locally around the Stowmarket area, in some of the villages, people are feeling that their neighbourhood plans have been ignored, and in terms of updating them when the joint local plan comes in, I think it's going to be difficult to persuade communities to update their neighbourhood plans. But I think we need, if we're going to have any form of community planning of housing development, we've got to do something to encourage involvement and realistic involvement, and that historically that's been through neighbourhood plans. I don't think there's a question there. It's just my sort of feelings looking through the report. So I think everyone has had a say. Councillor McCraw, I think you were giving some thoughts to a recommendation or a proposal. I don't know if you've got anything else you'd like to say, whether you would want to.
Well, I would be happy to propose obviously 3.1 as stated, and for 3.2 that the committee recognise that housing and our strategy for it is one of our primary functions, and that we urge the Cabinet to continue in the support, to continue in the strand of looking for support from central government in whatever new reality emerges. It's difficult to get the wording right, I appreciate. What I'm trying to suggest is that we not only endorse this report, but we stressed, as Councillor Carter said, we double underline the importance of this, that this is a key function, and we should recognise that, and we should state it, because it is, it's an overall strategy. We're not just looking at some of the particular examples we've taken. It's about how do we get over the fact that the multiplier is 10 or 11 in Babergh and Mid-Suffolk. We can't control who moves into the district. We want people to move into the district, but there have to be places for them to go to, and they have to be fit and proper places for them to live in, and in whatever form of life that they choose to have, or works out in the future. So the key thing is just to stress the importance of this and to keep insisting that this become one of the primary focuses of any good council. We're building more council houses. We're looking for more partnerships. There's one coming up in my own ward. The work is just about to start once they can get the planning conditions agreed. All these things have taken time, but they are coming to some fruition in the course of the last few years. And that's something that was not the case 20 years ago or even 30 years ago. So we are moving in the right direction, but that means that the pressure must be kept up. So I think just some way of saying We recognise the importance of the housing strategy as one of our primary functions and stress that it should receive as much political support across all groups and the Cabinet in the future.
So
I don't know if Henriette can put that into the most suitable language. Normally I have an idea, but I don't have in this one because it's such a vague sort of idealistic approach. But I just think this double underlining is absolutely crucial. We must do it.
Can I just? I've made some notes, and I just wonder if this might more or less fit the bill, and then anyone else chip in. That members thank officers for their report, presentation, and the work they have been carrying out, especially at the commencement of the COVID restrictions. And I was going to put something about their innovative approach in there as well, perhaps, because they've been very successful in bids and the work that they've done, and to recognise the importance of these strategies and stress that housing continues to be recognised by Cabinet and Council as a key priority.
Yeah, or I was going to say, or one of our primary functions as a council.
As a primary function, yeah.
As I think that's a fair description of a local authority at a district level. That this is one of the primary functions of any decent local authority. You don't have to include the word decent. Any local authority.
So yeah, so I mean, Councillor McCraw, interrupt if you feel that we need to change the word slightly. Members thank officers for their report, presentation, and for the work they've been carrying out, especially at the commencement of COVID restrictions, and for their innovative approach to delivering housing. No, not delivering housing, delivering to their innovative approach.
Delivering a housing strategy. Or delivering these strategies. Since there's housing, homelessness reduction and rough sleeping, these strategies.
And recognise the importance, 3.2, recognise the importance of these strategies and stress that housing should continue to be recognised by Cabinet and Council as a primary function.
Yes.
So
housing and these strategies, okay? Because they address that primary function.
Well, recognise the importance of these strategies and stress that housing continues to be recognised by Cabinet and Council as a primary function.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that as 3.2 with the 3.1 as suggested in the paper. And I would so propose.
I suggest that rather than we just note the contents of the report, that we thank them.
Oh, yes.
And we thank them for the presentation rather than note the verbal contributions.
Yeah.
Henriette, I don't know if you've got that. I can, after the meeting, I can send that to you if that will help, or we can just compare notes. So, Councillor McCraw, are you proposing that?
I am so proposing.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Carter, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. I was trying to run it through Grammarly and crashed the computer, so I've seen most of it is written right. But yes, happy to second that.
Thank you very much. So we have a proposer, we have a seconder. So could I ask the governance officer to carry out a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Chair. Councillor Carter.
4, especially if I can get this keyboard to work. Yes, 4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Epkenyoung.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
And Councillor Wellham.
4.
And that is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I would suggest that we have a comfort break now for a few minutes. But could I ask the officers, is it better to resolve to exclude the public from the next item before or after we have the break? Or does it make no difference?
Let me just think. I think I would like to do a roll call when we come back from the break, Chair, and then go into private session, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that? I think that's probably. Let me just think the practicality of that. Actually,
I would agree.
Emily, would we agree with that? Is that the best way of doing it? I think. Yes, we'll do a roll call and come back, and then we go into private session.
Right. Okay. So
Chair,
the rest,
if
sorry.
I may just confirm, it's Emily, your monitoring officer. As Henriette said, I think the best process would be to come back from the break, check that everybody's back in the meeting, and then take the vote to move into closed session.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
So can we all be back at 11:45 then, please? Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome back to the meeting. We are now moving on to item 12, which is the resolution to exclude the public.
Chair, can I do? Chair, may I do a roll call first to make sure everybody's actually in the meeting? I do apologise.
No, it's me. Sorry. Yes.
Fine. I'm doing a roll call now. Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Grandin. Councillor Grandin, you're on mute.
I'm here. Thank you.
Councillor McCraw.
Present.
Councillor Osborne.
Present.
Councillor Carter.
Present.
Councillor Epkin-Young.
Present.
Councillor Muller.
Present.
Councillor Scarf.
Present.
Councillor Welham.
Present.
Right, we're all present.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to rush ahead. Yes, we're moving on to item 12, which is the resolution to exclude the public, which terms include the press. We will now go into closed session to discuss the next item on the agenda, to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Do I have a proposal, please?
I'll propose that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. And a seconder?
I'll propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Adrian Osborne.
Thank you.
So the governance officer will now conduct a roll call vote.
Okay. Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Grandin. Councillor Grandin, you're on mute.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Epkin-Young.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
And Councillor Welham.
4. So the governance officer now will confirm when the live stream has ended.
And we're back on YouTube, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are now going to consider together items 7, 10 and 11. So that's the key decisions list, the Babergh and the Mid-Suffolk work plans. Can you note that the next meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, can you note that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting in January will be on the 18th of January, not on the 14th, as stated in the work plans. Does anybody have any comments on the forthcoming decisions list first, please? Did anyone see anything in the decisions lists that would require us to add anything to the work plans? No. So if we look now at the two work plans, there's a lot of commonality between the two because many of the meetings are joint meetings. But does anyone from Babergh have any comment on the Babergh work plan, please? No. Does anyone from Mid-Suffolk have any comment on the Mid-Suffolk work plan?
Chair.
Sorry, Councillor McGraw.
I wasn't quick enough on the trigger there, Chair.
Sorry.
I do apologise. See, we're on page 132.
I think the work plan's 134, isn't it?
133, 134, yeah.
Oh, got
Yes.
it, 133. It's just to note that by Chair's agreement, and just to make sure all members are aware of the fact that we've cancelled the meeting for the 19th of October because we've been rather busy recently and some reports wouldn't be ready in time. And so everybody gets a slight break in the October, but then considering we've been meeting about twice a month, it seems for the last 3 months, I don't think there's any harm in that.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. Can I just add that the February, March and May meetings are likely to be joint meetings. It's noted thus on the Mid-Suffolk work plan, but it needs to be noted similarly on the Babergh work plan.
Chair, I do apologise. It's because the work plans has actually been updated since then, but this went to publication before we just before the meeting, so it should all be okay on the current work plans. But I'll make sure members see those.
Thank you very much. So they are for noting. I don't think we have to. We don't have to vote, do we? So
may I just interrupt briefly, Chair?
Yes, do.
These will be the work plans that are presented to the annual councils later this month, are they not?
Yes, the ones that we have attached to this agenda, I'm afraid, are. So I will possibly table a new work plan for you. Would you appreciate that?
I think it's best, since we're reporting it to Cabinet, I mean to council and to Cabinet. I can't remember which one. Council obviously is for Babergh is tomorrow.
Yes.
But that's really just for noting, and so minor changes are always possible.
Yes. Would you ask me to table a new updated work plan?
I don't think it's necessary. I think we can because it's a red fact that sometimes small minor changes are made.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we've noted the Babergh work plan. We note the Mid-Suffolk work plan. So this concludes the meeting. The next meeting will be a joint meeting on Monday, the 23rd of November at 9:15 for a 9:30 start. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for the officers for all that they have done in the background and the advice that they have given. So that finishes the meeting.